It is now nearly 40 years since London's trams disappeared. That recording of E1 Class 1768 was made on the 29th of August 1950, shortly before the car was withdrawn. But it was not until the early hours of July the 6th, 1952, that the final cars ran into New Cross Depot. On July the 1st, 1933, over 2,600 trams had passed to the newly created London Passenger Transport Board. Buses still cover most of the vast network once served by the trams. These rails in Beresford Square, Woolwich, survived until quite recently. Buildings include the London County Council Tramways Central Repair Depot at Charlton. Here, members of the London County Council Tramways Trust are seen removing a change pit for preservation. Over much of the network, power was obtained from the conduit method of current collection, with change pits to facilitate a switch to the more conventional system of overhead wiring. The site of Penhall Road scrapyard. The approach to a long-abandoned horse-car depot near Archway in North London, the track still in situ. An embossed LCC section box at Herne Hill. And the southern portal of the 1,000-yard-long Kingsway subway on the Victoria Embankment. Nearly 40 years after trams stopped using the tunnel, rails are still to be found, including those on the steeply graded incline at the north end. Full coverage of the subway is featured in companion video, London Trams Part 2. This is the former London United Tramways depot at Fulwell. And this, the LCC depot at Brixton Hill. Before the creation of London Transport, the capital was served by both private and municipal tramways, of which the largest was the London County Council Tramways, the LCC, which operated an extensive network of routes north and south of the Thames, much of which used the conduit method of current collection. The first LCC electric routes opened in May 1903. 2 car types were delivered. The A-Class were built by the Electric Railway and Tramway Company of Preston on Brill 22E trucks. The Prince of Wales, later King George V, is seen boarding number 86 in 1905. The B-Class is represented by number 106, restored by the London County Council Tramways Trust. Also built by the Electric Railway and Tramway Company, they were mounted on Brill 21E trucks. Several B-Class were sold to other undertakings, for example, Sheffield. Some, like 106, were converted to snow brooms, as will be seen later. Built by Hurst Nelson on Mountain and Gibson maximum traction trucks, 300 E-Class top-covered double-deckers were delivered in 1906, as represented by car 732, seen during a workers' strike at Stamford Hill Depot. Two batches of single-deckers with steel bodies were built for running through the Kingsway subway, Class F by the United Electric Car Company of Preston, and Class G represented here by Brush of Loughborough. The E1 class proved highly successful, over 1,000 eventually entering service between 1907 and 1932, including examples for municipal operators such as Croydon and Walthamstow. 875 E1s were built between 1907 and 1912, the bodies and trucks coming from a variety of different suppliers. All had Westinghouse motors and controllers. A shorter version of the E1, designed for lightly trafficked and hilly routes, the 2-axle M class were mounted on LCC Class 5 swing bolster trucks with pressed steel side frames. 1724, seen on the former Bexley system, entered service in 1910. A 125 Series 2 E1s were delivered in 1922. Between 1926 and 1931, hundreds of LCC cars were Pullmanized, being equipped with improved motors, controllers, seats and lighting. A final batch of E1s, Series 3, followed in 1930. These had English electric bodies. In 1930-31, 2 groups of new cars replaced older life-expired vehicles. The E3 class had Hurst Nelson all-metal bodies and 2 times 57.5 horsepower motors. A batch of 50 E3s were ordered by Leighton Corporation but operated by the LCC. For hilly routes, the HR2 class had 4 times 35 horsepower motors and EMB equal wheel heavyweight trucks. A second batch of HR2s had no trolleys, being confined to conduit operation only. LCC number 1, built in 1932, was designed as the forerunner of a new generation of trams. It boasted air brakes, 4 times 35 horsepower motors, equal wheel heavyweight trucks, and a new style controller. Following the formation of London Transport, a few rebuilds such as number 2 still entered service until 1935. London Transport inherited some 1,700 cars from the LCC, of which large numbers were to survive in South London until the final tramway abandonment between 1950 and 1952. As trolleybuses replaced trams elsewhere in the capital, London Transport transferred the newest cars south of the river, including the Felthams. Designed to stem a drop in passenger levels, the 64-seater Felthams were placed in service by both the London United Tramways and the Metropolitan Electric Tramways, displacing many older veterans, such as LUT number 58, which is seen entering Fulwell Depot Yard for the last time. A few glimpses now of the wide variety of rolling stock which used to exist in and around London. First, a dramatic reconstruction for the cinema of an anarchist group hijacking a tram. The actual incident occurred in Tottenham in 1909, but the film sequences were shot on the South Metropolitan system in and around Wallington. Erith and Bexley cars together at Bexley Heath. Note the 2 second-hand LCC B-class double-deckers. These cars were replaced by trolleybuses in 1935. The London United had been the first to introduce electric trams in 1901 and the first to introduce trolleybuses in 1931, replacing tram routes from Wimbledon to Hampton Court via Kingston. Hampton Court continued to be served by trams running via Twickenham until 1935. In this 1931 view, note the open top car in the background on one of the routes converted to trolleybuses. The 67 gave way to trolleybuses in 1935. Felthams and older cars on the LUT continued to work together until 1936, with the Felthams being transferred to the former LCC depot at Telford Avenue. In these brief sequences, note MET Experimental Rebuild number 77 of 1929, the Silver Queen. MET Feltham survived in North London until 1938, although due to clearance restrictions they were not authorised to work as far as Barnet on Route 19. Finchley, with an extremely rare glimpse of an E1 on Route 19, as well as the more usual MET Type H. MET Type E single-decker 146 was used for civic occasions, and later as LPTB 2312 was the last passenger car to descend from Alexandra Palace. These views were taken in April 1938 near Turnpike Lane Station. Included are Felthams and MET Type H, an LCC E1, another H. These cars had replaced some of the Felthams already transferred south of the river, a Type G, and two more LCC E1s. Further south at Manor House, an ex-Walthamstow car is seen during the brief time these cars worked on Route 27. Contrasts. Ex-MET 2222 is nearly 30 years old and will be scrapped a few weeks later, whereas 2056 was one of the last totally new cars to enter service in London. Trolleybuses replaced the long lines to Ponders End and Waltham Cross in October 1938. Experimental Feltham 2167 ex-MET 330 of 1929 is seen alongside a production model. MET H-Type 249 on Route 79 in 1931. Short scene showing trams in Manor Park and East Ham. Rare colour sequences now in Leytonstone in 1938. They show several views of cars on Route 61. The 61, together with the 63, succumbed to trolleybuses in November 1939, 2 months after the outbreak of war. Despite the war, 2 further routes were replaced by trolleybuses in 1940, but all the remaining services were reprieved, leaving 100 route miles, of which 75% was on the conduit. Over 800 cars remained, with more in storage. They operated from 10 depots on 37 routes and 6 night services. The fleet included veteran E1s dating from 1907, cars rehabilitated just prior to the war, modern E3, HR2 and Felthams, together with E1 types from Croydon, East Ham, West Ham and Walthamstow. During the war, the trams received headlight masks and white bumpers. These detail post-war plough sequences by Stanley Eads. The canvas shelters for the plough shifters were provided in 1946. In July 1950, London Transport announced details of their phased withdrawal of the trams under the code name Operation Tramaway. It was to start in October 1950 and was scheduled to take 2 years. Geoffrey Ashwell, seen here, filmed the London tram scene starting in 1947, when the remaining routes were still at full strength. He was assisted by V.C. Jones and Jack Law. 2 routes to disappear in Phase 1 of Operation Tramaway were the 26 and 31. A variety of cars seen at the southern portal of the Kingsway subway. Savoy Street Strand crossover. Views taken inside East Ham E1, car number 100. Even the driver is fascinated by the activities of the cameraman. August Bank Holiday 1949 and Victoria Embankment is virtually deserted. One of the older veteran E1s, 1225, dated from a batch delivered in 1908-1909. And another elderly E1 heading for Blackfriars. The embankment, with its semi-reserved track, provided a large terminal loop, with paired routes operating via either Blackfriars or Westminster Bridge. For example, an inbound 18 from Croydon worked round via Blackfriars, whilst a 16 worked out via Blackfriars. To reach the tracks on Blackfriars Bridge, cars swept from the embankment into a giant curve involving a change of direction of 125 degrees. 1794 is a Series 2 E1 of 1922. 2107 is an ex-MET Feltham working to Croydon only. 147 an HR2 bound for Peckham Rye. 2070 recently repainted is another MET Feltham. And 2167, the experimental Feltham, was to survive only until 1949. Blackfriars Bridge was widened to accommodate double track on the west side in 1909 and was one of only 3 locations where trams were permitted to enter the City of London. E1 1545 was rehabilitated between 1935 and 6. Note the flush sides and improved indicator display. London trams always maintain fast average speeds. After the war, only number 1 and the Felthams had air brakes, all other cars stopping by means of the magnetic track brakes. A Series 3 E1 passes the 3rd track situated just south of Southwark Street. Dating from the first days of electrification, it proved useful in emergencies. Filmed from the cab of a Feltham, cars head along Blackfriars Road to the major 5-way tram junction at St George's Circus. This bunch of cars crossing into London Road includes a freshly painted West Ham E1. As well as this rather dingy Croydon E1. The Elephant and Castle 6-way junction handled hundreds of car movements at peak hours. Anxious to avoid being stranded on a dead point in the conduit, the driver of 1829 urges the bus to move forward. Fortunately, all is well. Note the variety of different destination displays on this line of cars. In this part of Walworth Road there was a most unusual arrangement. The 2 trams are working in the opposite direction to all the other traffic. This vast intersection has since been totally rebuilt. The car on Route 62 is turning towards Walworth Road, whilst the Feltham following behind heads into Newington Butts on a short working 16X. An ex-Croydon Corporation car on Route 16 is followed by an ex-LCC E1 on Route 2. Both Felthams still display front exit warning signs, despite the fact that the front doors were now restricted to emergency use only. The signs were later removed. Sometime after the war, the second car in this sequence still has boarded up windows on the top deck. Eventually, it will be sent to be repaired at Charlton Works. Note the ornate Croydon-style 16 stencil on this car. Fresh from a repaint at Charlton Works, a trolleyless HR2 is outbound to Forest Hill via New Cross. Faced by the increasing volume of traffic, passengers alighting at Kennington are forced to wait for a chance to reach the curb. The young man in this view is sound recordist Jack Law. South still towards Clapham and Tooting, along part of the LCC's first electric route opened in May 1903. Stockwell. With the passing of the trams, this busy junction was also totally redesigned. Each major London tramway junction was controlled by the pointsman, whose job it was to keep the service flowing smoothly. Possibly the most interesting closure in Phase 1 was the 34, which followed a circuitous route from Battersea to Blackfriars and was the only line with two changes from conduit to overhead. Note the three identifying coloured lights above the destination box of 1592. These were used until the introduction of route numbers. "34s pass the hole-in-the-wall entrance to the LCC's first purpose-built electric depot at Clapham. A typical LCC cloverleaf request stop. And a glass-panelled caution sign. A Route 28 car transferred to Clapham to facilitate reconstruction of Wandsworth Depot emerges from Clapham Park Road. The car after this was unusual in that the body was off E-Class 420, which had been fitted with a new top deck. In March 1937, E1 1597 was involved in an accident. Its trucks, motors and controllers were transferred to 420 and the two cars then exchanged numbers, so that former 420 was scrapped as 1597 in January 1951. Battersea Bridge, London's first post-war tramway abandonment, crossed by Route 34 until the 23rd of March 1950, when it received severe structural damage. The 34s were then cut back to the south side of the bridge until abandoned. Some glimpses now of other routes closed in Stage 1, the railway crossing at Nine Elms, filmed by Alan Gildersleeve. Wandsworth, terminus of routes 12 and 31. Vauxhall, with number 12s departing for the Albert Embankment, whilst other routes turn for Vauxhall Bridge Road and Victoria. This load will have to be accommodated on the front platform. Albert Embankment, served by the 12, 26 and 31. A 26 alongside Lambeth Palace. Borough terminus, subsequently used by Route 72 until July 1951. Clapham Junction, terminus of routes 26 and 28. 93 trams were withdrawn at the end of Stage 1.
We are in Battersea Park Road and awaiting the arrival of the last 31 tram. I can see it in the distance now being followed by a convoy of cars, mainly from the press, one or two people from London Transport. It's just stopping, and in a few minutes it will be starting again and coming past us here, parked on the bridge near the Dogs' Home. And here she is coming along, 195, the last 31 ever, and the last car to traverse this section of track. October the 1st, 1950. And there she goes, the last 31 ever, followed by police cars and private cars.
Car 1384 recorded on its last ever journey to Penhall Road scrapyard in 1950. The principal casualty of Stage 2 was the 9-mile route to Wimbledon, requiring 32 cars in peak hours. From Stockwell to Tooting, the Wimbledon services shared the tracks with the 8 and 20 circular and the peak hour only routes 6, 22 and 24. Slowing for these track repairs allows this passenger to make a somewhat unorthodox entrance. Balham High Road. A utility Daimler on Route 88 precedes a Feltham on Route 8. A busy Saturday at Balham Station. Beyond the station, the road widens sufficiently to accommodate a loading island at Hurley's Corner. "1885 was one of only 4 HR2s to be treated in the massive rehabilitation program of 1935-6 and is filmed here on an enthusiast tour in Tooting in 1948. Tooting Broadway and a Feltham on Circle Route 8 nudges into Mitcham Road to return to Victoria via Streatham. Whilst in the opposite direction, a car on Circle Route 20 negotiates the unusually angled curve out of Mitcham Road on its journey to Victoria via Balham. Series 2 E1 1793 heads southwest from Tooting towards Merton and the Longley Road change pit, which mark the historic boundary between the LCC trams and the former empire of the London United Tramways. In 1922, the gap between the two systems was closed, and on May the 2nd, the LCC took over operation from the LUT, extending their routes 2 and 4 to Wimbledon Hill. A detailed close-up of the plough fork and guiding rod, tools of the trade for the plough shifter. From Longley Road to Wimbledon, the route was under the wires. At South Wimbledon Station, a car turns into Merton Road. Whilst another leaves the Merton Road single track and turns into Merton High Street. The pole on the right carried the signal lights which control the single track section. Cautiously edging into Wimbledon Broadway, the tram will pass the last surviving green and white LUT tram stop outside the Elite Cinema. Then a brisk run to Wimbledon Town Hall, terminus since December 1932. Here passengers can change onto the trolleybuses which displaced the LUT trams to Kingston in September 1931. This 1931 AEC has bodywork by the Union Construction Company, who also built the Felthams. trolleybus waits whilst the tram negotiates the scissors crossover. These early LUT trolleybuses were affectionately known as the diddlers. And despite new post-war vehicles, it was buses that displaced another 101 trams with the completion of Stage 2 of Operation Tramaway.
And now here's 1847 at the plough change at Merton. The inspector's just having a pint of beer. You can hear the crowds of people and cars passing by. Photographs are being taken. And the plough fork is being dragged away for the last time.
Here she comes. On the side, the words, "The last tram to and from the Odeon Balham, 50 years glorious service, Balham and District Chamber of Commerce." A great procession of people, 3 torches, and a terrific crowd of people running after it. And a great surge from the Broadway. Absolutely, one mass of people running, walking, one torchbearer left right behind there. Now the 1829 is moving off. Right. Conductor waving. There's only 1 or 2 lamps left in the tram. All the rest have been taken as souvenirs.
This stage saw the withdrawal of 92 cars, including the remaining Felthams, some of which had already left for further service in Leeds. Most of the MET batch, except 2079, had departed, leaving the majority of the LUT examples still working on the 12-mile trunk line to Croydon and Purley, which required 80 cars in peak hours. The Felthams, with their 2 70-horsepower motors and quick acceleration, were ideally suited to this long, straight route. Last day scenes at Brixton. During the infamous winter of 1947, Geoffrey Ashwell ventured out to record activity in the Streatham area. Snowbroom 033 was an ex-B-class double-decker 194 of 1903. Maintaining service in such conditions was demanding and labour-intensive. Here, staff use a bumper pole, normally employed to move cars stuck on a dead section of conduit, to hook up a Feltham and a Croydon E1. A disabled Feltham is pushed cautiously along, the driver of the Snowbroom having no clear view of the road ahead and relying upon a lookout stationed with him. O22 XB Class 106 has since been fully restored to its original 1903 condition. One of the XLCC carrier breakdown tenders. An ex-Walthamstow E1 hauls a Feltham into Telford Avenue depot. (2151) in Norbury. The junction at Thornton Heath Pond, with a rehabilitated ex-Croydon car turning out of Brigstock Road on the 3.5-mile local Croydon route 42. 380, rehabilitated in November 1936, with flush sides and inset indicator displays, is seen on the single track in Brigstock Road. Thornton Heath Terminus. And a Feltham approaches Purley Terminus. In the safe hands of driver Stan Collins, LCC No. 1 made its final appearance on the streets of London on the afternoon of the 7th of April 1951. Nearly 13 years earlier, in 1938, No. 1 had made a long journey from Waltham Cross to Purley. The tour was filmed by J.W. Fowler, founder of the Light Railway Transport League. Waltham Cross. At Manor House Change Pit, ex-MET G-Class 2273. This was withdrawn a few months later. Down into the Kingsway subway and out onto the embankment. Felthams swing into Telford Avenue depot, which have been altered to accommodate their additional length. Streatham Change Pit. An unvestibule Croydon E1 on Route 42. And finally, after nearly 25 miles, Purley Terminus. No. 1 remained a firm favourite with enthusiasts and was used for several post-war tours, usually driven by Alf Perry and filmed by Geoffrey Ashwell. Based at Telford Avenue since 1937, No. 1 was confined to peak hour use only and was driven by one of a panel of drivers who had been specially passed to operate the car. Here No. 1 has ventured out to South East London at Middle Park Avenue. A glimpse of the air brake, and a good view of the platform doors and drop-down step. No. 1 was mounted on HR2 trucks intended for car number 160. Here it is seen between Lewisham and Greenwich. Entering Camberwell Depot, and shedding the plough at Brixton Hill Depot. Number 1 was indeed extra special, a prototype car built in 1931-2 for a new fleet of luxury double-deckers. Nicknamed Bluebird after its distinctive blue and ivory livery, it was at Holloway until 1937, when it went south and was painted in London Transport red and cream. Unfortunately, the tide had turned against the trams, and no production batch was ever built. Jim Joyce filmed Bluebird on her migration north to Leeds in May 1951. Renumbered 301, it joined other London exiles, including 3 HR2s purchased in 1939 and the Felthams acquired for £500 each. 501 X2099 was the first to go in 1949 and was still in London livery 2 years later. Some Felthams operated in Leeds until 1959, but Bluebird was withdrawn in September 1957 and is now in the National Tramway Museum at Crouch. But for most London cars there was to be no second home. Their last resting place was a huge specially built graveyard at Penhall Road, Charlton, where after each conversion scores of trams, some with visible evidence of body fatigue, would make this final one-way journey. Taken sideways by the traverser, the cars withdrawn after stage 3 were shunted onto one of the 26 storage sidings to await their turn to be burnt, only the Felthams escaping.
Streatham High Road now is absolutely packed solid with people. Traffic is at a standstill. I've just seen that the car is number 947. Number 947, the last car. And now I can see 3 flags being moved down the pavement. I can't see the people carrying them. Towards the tram. From the front steps of the Astoria, down along the pavement now, nearing the tram.
Should old acquaintance be should old
The Festival of Britain brought some excitement to London after long years of drab post-war austerity, and to cope with the onslaught of visitors, special bus services were operated to and from the various festival sites. Even a temporary Bailey Bridge was built, leading to the exhibition entrance. Note the track patching going on in the foreground. These scenes by Jim Joyce. A trolleyless HR2 on the south side of Westminster Bridge on Tuesday, June the 5th, 1951, just before the bridge was closed at 2:30 for 2 hours for the state visit of the King of Norway. This led to some unusual workings. An inspector explains why the cars are being turned short. Using the P-car-only curve is one of the dwindling number of veteran E1s on Route 40, followed by a rehabilitated HR2, 2 West Ham cars, and another E1. With commendable imagination, a length of track abandoned in April 1951 was reopened for the 2 hours. This was Kennington Park Road, which allowed Route 33 to reach the subway by travelling from the Oval to the Elephant and over Blackfriars Bridge. Here cars kick up the dust clogged in the disused rails. Both subway routes reversed at the southern portal, offering rare views of 33s and 35s at Blackfriars. The track layout at Waterloo used by Route 68 still included a loop where trams once ran round open-top trailers some 30 years previously. Two 68s pass outside the Old Vic Theatre. The terminus of Route 70, the other line to close in Stage 4, was Tooley Street. The 68s and 70s passed through Bermondsey and Rotherhithe en route to Deptford and Greenwich. Here is the right-angled bend at Dock Head. Note the bombing on the left and the new building on the right. This is the single track in Parker's Row, Bermondsey. Both routes were home to the 1930 series of E1s, once thought to have been mounted on trucks from the old subway single-deckers. A brief glimpse of Deptford Swing Bridge. And Greenwich Terminus. 33 cars were withdrawn at the end of Phase 4. The final departures from Tooley Street and Borough, still used by Route 72, were recorded for posterity.
And there she goes, just negotiating the points, off to Greenwich and finally to New Cross. And here's 936 just arriving at New Cross Depot. Buglers seem to be on board on the top deck. And here she comes along. Yes, she's just passed by, preparing to reverse into the depot. It's 2:08, gingerly creeping over the points towards New Cross Gate. The last 72 from the borough has gone.
In September 1951, the Light Railway Transport League toured the routes to be abandoned in Stage 5 on HR2 Class 120. This may be possibly the only occasion a car of this class visited the Manor House terminus. Note the unusual 35A stencil. The main point of attraction was the impressive 4-track layout on Dog Kennel Hill. (120) also visited Downham Way, but being one of the HR2s equipped purely for conduit operation, it could not go to Grove Park. The conduit system included many interesting features, for example, double slots on single track sections such as Stockwell Road. A plough jammed in the conduit could cause delays. Note the oval-shaped frame of the plough carrier peculiar to these ex-Croydon E1 cars. These evocative conduit sequences by Jim Joyce. To prevent a serious hold-up, trams are reversed to the nearest crossover to return wrong line running, as with 1653. Which then stops to pick up some bemused passengers. The plough carrier guide is dumped on the front platform of 392. Being fairly close to the central repair depot at Charlton, a former LCC breakdown tender is soon on the scene. After much effort, the offending plough is finally ejected, and the service resumed. Stage 5 led to closure of route miles in Dulwich and Peckham. 6 routes and 1 night service were involved, including the peak hour-only line 60 from Southwark Bridge to Dulwich Library. 99 cars were withdrawn, including most of the Series 2 brush-built E1s, a trolleyless HR2 at Victoria. Five of the routes abandoned in Stage 5 climbed steadily from Camberwell through leafy suburbs on grades varying from 1 in 19 to 1 in 63, until eventually they reached the summit of the exotically named Dog Kennel Hill. Because of a severe grade of 1 in 11 over 500 feet, the LCC doubled both the down track and the up track in May 1912 to overcome a Board of Trade ruling that only one car could be on either the uphill or the downhill track at the same time. For 20 years, the HR2s enjoyed a monopoly on the Dog Kennel Hill routes, and this 380 yards of track was a magnet for photographers. This view by Alan Gildersleeve demonstrates the steep gradient. Here we are on board an HR2 descending Dog Kennel Hill. Goose Green, junction for the branch to Peckham Rye, served by routes 56 and 84. HR2127, which we will see at Peckham Rye terminus, has an E1 style top deck fitted after bomb damage in September 1940. A car descends Lordship Lane heading north towards Goose Green. P-car only Route 60 reverses outside Dulwich Library. Cars on Route 62 and 66 in Forest Hill. The 58 followed a U-shaped course from Victoria to Blackwall Tunnel, with single track and loops between Lewisham and Greenwich. Blackwall Tunnel terminus.
It is just after 11:20 and this car is due off on its last journey to Camberwell Green Depot. The car number is 145 and the inspector's just looking at his watch, and any second now she'll be off over this section of track for the last time. And that was the last 58 from Blackwall Tunnel. There's another car just leaving the depot, showing Camberwell Green number 35, number 1931. Brilliantly painted, number 1931 with the high back seats on the lower deck. And a Camberwell. Here is the special number 120 just emerging from the depot. And that was car number 1893, putting on a lovely piece of magnetic braking, just pulling up at the bottom of the hill. Tomorrow this road, of course, will be served by buses, and there she goes underneath the railway bridge, the last car to descend Dog Kennel Hill.
Companion video London Trams Part 2 covers the Kingsway subway. There is also extensive coverage of the last 6 routes, which were abandoned on the 6th of July, 1952. Included in London Trams Part 2 are classic scenes taken by Jim Joyce, Peter Matthews, Stanley Eads and Alan Gildersleeve, as well as material from the Huntley archive. Also included are unique and rare colour scenes. London Trams Part 2 is also available. To conclude London Trams Part 1 and to accompany the closing credits, a recording made by Jack Law of Feltham 2090 on Route 18 in 1950.
Norbury.